The air inside the studio was unusually tense. Fox News had teased the segment all day, two fierce minds. One divisive topic. The lower third banner teased viewers further, Gen Z conservatism, real movement or loud minority? Jessica Tarlov sat upright, legs crossed, brows arched as she scrolled through her iPad. She looked calm, composed, but her smile wasn't casual. It was loaded. Across from her sat Karoline Leavitt, former Trump press staffer, now rising GOP firebrand. The youngest political voice on the stage, dressed in a crisp navy blazer and minimal jewelry, Karoline looked like someone prepared to battle facts with fire. The moderator gave them the usual nod. Red light, mic's live. And like that, the war began. Jessica started slowly, with what she called framing the context. But even her framing felt like a jab. Let's be clear, Jessica said, a slight laugh at the corner of her mouth. This isn't about political diversity. It's about a party trying to mask regression with youth appeal. Karoline's just the latest branding tool. The moment echoed in the studio like a slap, subtle, condescending, and calculated. Karoline didn't flinch. She waited. The moderator turned to her. Karoline? A pause. Then Karoline leaned forward, her tone casual, almost too calm. Jessica, I'd rather be accused of being young than pretending I still understand this country while clinging to talking points from 2008. The moderator's jaw visibly clenched. A stifled oof could be heard from behind the cameras. Jessica blinked once, not from shock, but recalibration. Karoline didn't stop there. You keep mocking young conservatives like we're some kind of marketing experiment. But what we are voters. And whether you like it or not, we're showing up. Loudly, and legally. That was the moment everything changed. The live comment feed lit up. Clips were already being clipped. And the interview wasn't even 90 seconds in. Jessica Tarlov wasn't new to verbal combat. She'd sparred with senators, outwitted think tank pundits, and even diffused Tucker Carlson once, all while staying camera-ready and intellectually sharp. But something about Karoline's comeback didn't just sting. It destabilized her. Still smiling, Jessica tilted her head and turned to the camera like a seasoned actor pivoting to the audience. You know, Karoline, it's easy to throw out a zinger, but being loud doesn't make you right. Passion doesn't equal policy. It was the kind of line that usually silenced a debate, until Karoline leaned back in her chair with a smirk that said, "You just handed me the ball." True, Karoline replied, but recycled dismissiveness doesn't equal credibility either. And we both know what happens when the same pundit class underestimates young voices. You lose elections. Badly. The room temperature dropped. The moderator cleared his throat. Ladies, let's. But Jessica raised a finger, not rudely, but firmly. She wasn't finished. The difference between us, Jessica said, voice sharpening, is that I base my arguments on data, institutions, and tested frameworks. Not TikTok clout and one-liners designed for Twitter clips. It was a direct shot. The kind meant to sting deeper, into the integrity of Karoline's rise. Karoline inhaled slowly, then smiled. I'll tell you what's more dangerous than TikTok clout, she said. It's when political veterans dress up old arrogance as intellectual maturity. The problem isn't that I'm young, it's that people like you have been speaking at my generation for years, and still think we're not listening. Jessica's face tightened for a moment, not anger, but recognition. She knew that wasn't just a retort. That was generational fatigue speaking, and viewers knew it too. Comments flooded in. Twitter erupted. Karoline just nuked the segment. Jessica walked into that one. This is the future of conservatism. Backstage, a producer whispered, we've got a clip going viral in real time. And yet, the fire wasn't out. Jessica was regrouping, eyes narrowed, jaw set. If Karoline thought that was the end of it, she hadn't seen what was coming next. Jessica adjusted her earpiece and leaned forward, both elbows now on the table. Her smile had faded into something far more serious, measured, academic, and sharp. Karoline, she began, the conservative movement you're part of, it's not new. It's just louder. You're selling populism with a youthful face. But beneath it, it's the same isolationist, anti-science, anti-woman rhetoric we've been fighting for decades. There it was. The accusation not just of bad politics, but of moral decay. Of regression masquerading as revolution. Karoline remained silent for a second. Just enough time for the weight of Jessica's words to settle into the space. Then, with no change in posture or volume, she answered. You love accusing conservatives of being anti-woman, Karoline said. Yet when a conservative woman has the audacity to lead, to speak, to push back, you don't see her as empowered. You see her as a threat. Jessica let out a short breath. That's not. It's always the same, Karoline interrupted calmly. You champion feminism until the woman is wearing red. The moderator's eyes darted to his producer off-screen. Phones were lighting up. They could feel it. This wasn't just a debate. It was turning into a moment. Karoline continued. You claim to speak for my generation. But here I am, 26 years old, working-class background, conservative, and proud. And instead of engaging me with respect, you mock, belittle, and condescend, because I don't parrot your ideology. Jessica's face tightened. The studio was still, except for the quiet mechanical hum of live broadcast. That's not what I'm doing, she replied, trying to remain composed. I'm challenging dangerous narratives that disguise themselves in polished language. You represent a political machine that's been radicalized by media outrage and cultural resentment. And you, Karoline shot back without missing a beat, represent a political machine that's been failing quietly, politely, and publicly for 20 years. Which is worse? The question didn't need an answer, it echoed. Even the moderator didn't jump in this time. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled to timestamp the moment. That's the viral line, one of them muttered. Clip that. Now. Twitter already had it. The phrase, which is worse, was trending, and the fire had only begun to spread. Jessica Tarlov sat motionless for a beat. She was rarely shaken on live television, but this moment wasn't about losing ground. It was about something deeper, losing the audience. She turned slightly, not toward Karoline this time, but to the host. Let me ask you, Jessica began, tone cool but clipped, do we really want politics to be won by whoever delivers the most cutting insult? Are we going to ignore the dangers of misinformation just because someone says it confidently with a ring light behind them? It was a tactical pivot, reframing the moment not as a defeat, but a cautionary tale. But Karoline saw right through it. No one's asking for politics to become a roast battle, Jessica, she replied. But don't mistake clarity for cruelty. When young Americans hear half-truths packaged in elite vocabulary, we've learned to speak plainly, and yes, sometimes sharply, to defend ourselves. Then came the twist. Karoline reached beneath the desk and pulled out her phone. This, she said, holding up the screen, is a message I got last week from a 19-year-old waitress in Missouri. She said, and I quote, I used to think I had to be liberal to be heard. Then I saw someone like you. That's not a soundbite. That's someone waking up. Jessica's face changed. Not dramatically, but noticeably. She hadn't expected this. Karoline wasn't just holding her own. She was expanding the battleground. You say I'm part of a radical movement, Karoline continued. But what's more radical, a young woman standing up to legacy media, or an establishment so terrified of dissent that it calls her dangerous for not agreeing? The moderator looked stunned. Jessica folded her arms. You keep saying legacy media like it's a villain, Jessica said, her voice strained but still polished. We're journalists, analysts, researchers. We don't traffic in memes and viral rants. And yet, Karoline smiled, here we are, in a viral rant. The camera cut to the host's stunned expression. The studio broke into a rare silence, but the internet didn't. YouTube comment sections were exploding. TikTok edits were already making the rounds with dramatic music overlays and subtitles. Jessica was visibly trying to recalibrate. Karoline? She wasn't backing down. She was just getting started. Jessica's smile had vanished. Her lips were pressed into a thin line as she straightened in her chair, trying to regain the aura of calm professionalism. But Karoline's words had done more than land. They had unsettled. And worse, they had resonated. Viewers could feel it. Jessica knew the danger of moments like these, when control slips not through yelling or scandal, but through clarity. "You know what's really frustrating, Karoline," she said, adjusting the sleeve of her blazer. "It's not that you have opinions. It's that you speak as if you have all the answers, as if nuance is just an inconvenience." Karoline turned her head slightly, like someone already expecting the accusation. "Nuance is important," she said, "but so is courage. And for too long, nuance has been used as a shield, a way to dance around truth instead of confronting it." Jessica tried to cut in, but Karoline leaned forward, voice sharper now, not angry, exact. "What do you call nuance when it tells working-class Americans that their faith is outdated? That their family values are bigoted? That wanting secure borders means they hate immigrants? You don't get to call that nuance. That's just elitism with better lighting." Boom. The audience watching at home didn't need applause to know that hit hard. The internet sure knew. Reaction videos were popping up in real time, some praising, others raging, but all repeating the same line. Elitism with better lighting. Jessica sighed audibly, a misstep. The kind of moment producers beg you to avoid. It came across not as authoritative, but annoyed. "You're playing to an audience," she said, almost whispering, "not a conversation." Karoline tilted her head. "I am," she said. "And so are you. The only difference? Mine's not bored anymore." The moderator finally jumped in. "Ladies, let's pivot to the issue of education." But the real story was already told. The sparks weren't the debate. The story was the shift. In that moment, it became clear, Jessica wasn't debating a rising star. She was debating a movement. And it had a voice now, one that refused to shrink, apologize, or fit politely into the format she'd once controlled. The moderator, sensing the growing friction, finally tried to rein things in. "Let's shift gears," he said quickly. "Education reform. Where do each of you stand on what's being taught in our schools today?" But neither woman was ready to shift. The air was still charged, like a room holding its breath. Jessica was the first to lean back in. "Let's talk about schools." "Sure," she said. "Let's talk about how conservative leaders are banning books, censoring history, and treating teachers like enemies. Let's talk about the fear tactics wrapped in words like parental rights." Her words landed with weight. She wasn't just attacking policy, she was attacking philosophy. Karoline, however, didn't flinch. She straightened her blazer and spoke evenly, with that same eerie calm that made her all the more dangerous on live TV. "You act like conservatives are afraid of ideas. We're not. We're afraid of indoctrination disguised as education." Jessica let out a slight scoff. "Indoctrination? You mean diversity?" "No," Karoline said. "I mean telling an 8-year-old they're responsible for sins committed centuries before they were born. I mean forcing one worldview under the banner of tolerance, and calling dissent hate speech. That's not education. That's intellectual bullying." That one stung. Jessica sat up straighter, but Karoline didn't stop. "You say we're banning books. I say we're drawing a line between education and exploitation. Kids need to learn math, science, reading, not ideological shame." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to define what kids need. Experts do." "No," Karoline snapped, for the first time letting her voice rise. "Parents do." Boom. The studio didn't have an audience, but it didn't need one. The silence itself was heavy enough to feel like thunder. Jessica leaned back, arms crossed again. "This is what happens when you confuse passion for wisdom," she said bitterly. Karoline turned to the camera, calm once more. And this is what happens when you confuse tenure for relevance. That line stopped everything. Not just in the studio, but online. It was like the internet paused, then exploded. Hashtags were being born in real time. Hashtag tenure versus relevance. Hashtag Karoline strikes again. And deep down, Jessica Tarlov, a veteran of televised battles, knew what had just happened. She wasn't losing a debate, she was losing the narrative. Jessica Tarlov leaned forward again, this time slower, deliberate. Her tone changed, not defensive, but colder. Sharper. She was done debating policies. She was going for the personal. Karoline, she said, you talk like you invented courage. But what you're really doing is branding yourself on outrage. Not conviction. Not complexity. Just fury. The insult didn't need to be shouted. It was surgical, a subtle attempt to undercut Karoline's ethos, to suggest that she wasn't a thinker, just a performer. But Karoline was ready. Her eyes didn't blink, her voice didn't rise. Isn't it funny how any time a woman on the right speaks with strength, she's labeled angry, she asked, chin slightly raised. But when you raise your voice, Jessica, they call it passion. They call it fighting the good fight. Why is your fury noble, and mine toxic? Jessica tried to cut in, but Karoline kept going. You say I'm branding myself on outrage. No, I'm branding myself on truth, uncomfortable, unfiltered, and yes, sometimes unsettling. But if it shakes people, maybe it should. The moderator tried to jump in with a transition, but Karoline ignored him. The floor was hers, and the audience knew it. The truth is, this country is starving for honesty. And when you and your friends in the media treat every young conservative like a ticking time bomb instead of a human being, you reveal your fear, not your virtue. Jessica didn't speak, not yet. Because there was truth in that, maybe too much. And for the first time, the dynamic changed. Karoline wasn't just a guest, she was the moment. You know why this hits so hard, she added. Because it's not just about me and you. It's about every young woman watching right now who's been told she's too loud, too proud, too opinionated, unless she agrees with you. That one hit deep. Jessica's eyes narrowed, but her voice was silent. Backstage, a producer whispered, "We're not controlling this anymore. She's running the show." Even the control room stopped trying to jump in. The feed stayed live, and the battle line was no longer party versus party. It was legacy versus momentum, control versus relevance. Jessica Tarlov versus Karoline Leavitt, and the world was watching. Jessica Tarlov finally spoke, but this time, her voice was less steady. Still sharp, still intelligent, but the edge was softer. She wasn't unraveling, she was recalculating. You know, Karoline, she said, for someone so focused on truth, you spend a lot of time turning everything into a culture war. Not everything is oppression, not every disagreement is persecution. Karoline didn't blink. That's easy to say when the system was built for you, she replied, cool and measured. You sit at a table that's protected your ideas for decades. I had to fight to even be invited. Jessica smirked faintly, but it didn't land. Karoline leaned forward, tone now softer, but no less piercing. I didn't grow up with think tanks. I grew up with rent overdue, church on Sunday, and parents who worked 2 jobs so I could dream big. And now that I've finally earned a seat at the table, you want me to whisper? To defer? To apologize? Her voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but from the fire behind it. I won't. Jessica opened her mouth, but stopped. Because in that moment, Karoline wasn't debating, she was testifying. Every time I raise my voice, Karoline said, I'm speaking for the girl in Kansas who thinks she has to hide her values to get hired. For the mom in Pennsylvania who's terrified her son will be labeled dangerous just for asking the wrong question in class. The moderator was frozen. The producers let it breathe. You say I'm branding outrage? No, Jessica. I'm translating pain. And if that's uncomfortable for you, maybe it's time to ask why. Jessica looked down for a moment. Her hands were clasped. Her posture hadn't crumbled, but the veneer had. This wasn't about a viral clip anymore. It was about control, and how fast Karoline was stealing it. I'm not here for applause, Karoline finished. I'm here because people like you didn't expect people like me to show up. But we're here now. And we're not going away. Online, #WearyHereNow was already trending. The segment wasn't even over. But the shift had already happened. And for the first time, Jessica looked less like an expert. And more like a relic. Jessica Tarlov adjusted her posture. She could feel the shift. The usual playbook, hold frame, control tone, lean on legacy, wasn't working. Not with Karoline. Not today. She drew a slow breath and gave a half smile. You've gotten really good at performance, she said. But at some point, voters will want policy, not punchlines. It was an old play, accuse the other side of being all style, no substance. But Karoline didn't blink. You want policy? She asked. Fine. Let's talk about energy independence. Let's talk about a border crisis your party still pretends isn't real. Let's talk about crime in the cities you praise, where mothers can't even let their kids ride the subway. Jessica cut in quickly. And let's talk about the millions of Americans whose healthcare is still one emergency away from ruin. Let's talk about maternal mortality. Let's talk about underpaid teachers and overworked nurses. Yes, Karoline said. Let's talk about all of it. But let's also stop pretending the answer to every problem is a government program with a 6-month wait list and a $1 billion deficit. The audience watching from home was breathless. Jessica was fighting to regain control. But Karoline had flipped the script, and the roles. She wasn't the guest anymore. She was the challenger. You've had power for decades, Karoline continued. And you've used it to write off every voice that didn't speak your language, whether it came from a small town, a church pew, or a working-class kitchen table. Jessica didn't respond right away. Because she couldn't argue with the truth of it. You say I'm dangerous, Karoline said quietly. But maybe what scares you is that I sound like more Americans than you do. Boom. Another viral moment. Screenshots. Subtitles. Edits with dramatic music already in the works. Jessica took a deep breath. People used to respect experience. They still do, Karoline said. But they respect courage more. And they've had enough of being talked down to from panel shows and Ivy League roundtables. The moderator finally spoke again, voice thin. Ladies, But it was too late. Jessica wasn't just losing a debate. She was losing the room. And Karoline? She wasn't just winning. She was rewriting the rules. The tension in the studio had reached a silent, heavy peak. Jessica Tarlov stared across the table, her expression unreadable. Not smug. Not shaken. Just, still. As if realizing that the old rules had expired, and no one had told her. Karoline adjusted her mic slightly. Not for effect, just instinct. But the gesture sent a subtle message. She was just getting started. You know what the problem is, Jessica, she said. You talk like the American people are your audience. I talk like they're in the room with me. Jessica didn't respond. Not yet. You quote think tanks, Karoline continued. I quote my mother. You say I don't understand history, but you don't understand hunger. The kind that makes a kid grow up fast. The kind that makes you fight for something bigger than your own resume. The moderator looked up, wide-eyed. He knew what this was now. A closing argument. You mock my politics, Karoline said. You laugh at my youth. You dismiss my values. But let me tell you something, Jessica, America is not listening to you anymore. They're listening to us. And we're not here for permission. Jessica leaned forward, finally speaking, her voice slower now. You think you're a revolution. But revolutions burn out. Policy survives. Institutions survive. Karoline gave the faintest smile. Only the ones that earn it. Silence again. The kind of silence that doesn't break, it shatters. Across social media, clips from the exchange were already flooding every platform. Some praised Jessica's poise. Others declared Karoline the future. But one thing was clear to everyone watching. The torch hadn't been passed. It had been ripped away. I don't want your legacy, Karoline said, standing as the segment wrapped. I want something better. With that, the camera panned out slowly, a wide shot of two women, two ideologies, and a cultural shift happening in real time. And as the credits rolled, the only thing louder than the silence was the sound of millions of Americans replaying the moment on loop. In an era where voices clash louder than ever, sometimes it's not the volume that wins, it's the clarity. Tonight, we didn't just witness a debate, we witnessed a seismic shift. Karoline Leavitt didn't just respond, she redefined the terms. And Jessica Tarlov? She learned that tradition is no match for momentum. In the end, this wasn't about who shouted louder. It was about who spoke for the future, and who clung to the past. And whether you cheered, cringed, or questioned everything, you were watching the moment where the conversation changed. Forever.